The silent observer. The crystalline towers of Station Nexus stretched toward the void like frozen lightning, their surfaces reflecting the light of a dozen nearby stars. Within the Grand Assembly Hall, representatives from 300 species gathered for the most important trade summit in galactic history. The air hummed with the sound of universal translators working overtime, converting clicks, hisses, melodic tones, and subsonic rumbles into comprehensible speech. At the far end of the human delegation's modest table sat Marcus Chen, his weathered hands folded calmly in his lap. His gray hair was neatly combed, his simple black suit unremarkable among the elaborate robes, bioluminescent displays, and ceremonial armor worn by other delegates. Marcus had said perhaps 20 words during the entire 3-day summit, and those only when directly addressed. His silence was not born of nervousness or uncertainty, but of careful observation. The current speaker was Ambassador Vexthera of the Crystalline Collective, her translucent form shimmering as she gestured with multiple arms. The trade routes through the Kepler sector have become increasingly unstable, she declared, her voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Pirates, territorial disputes, and now the Vortex Supremacy's aggressive expansion threatens commerce for all peaceful species. A rumble of agreement passed through the assembly. The Vortex Supremacy had indeed become a growing concern. Their reptilian warriors, standing nearly 8 feet tall with scales like armor plating, had conquered 12 systems in the past year alone. Their military doctrine was simple: overwhelming force applied without mercy. Diplomacy was weakness, negotiation was surrender, and any species that could not defend itself deserved extinction. The Vortex question requires immediate attention, boomed General Krex Tar, the Supremacy's representative. His voice was like grinding stone, and his yellow eyes swept the assembly with predatory satisfaction. My people offer protection to all who acknowledge our strength. Submit to Vortex rule, and your merchant fleets will travel safely under our escort. The assembly erupted in angry chittering, roars, and mechanical bleeping. Several delegates rose to their feet, appendages waving in outrage. Only Marcus remained perfectly still, his dark eyes fixed on the Vortex general with quiet intensity. Protection, scoffed Chancellor Vortex of the Hegemony of Rings. You mean subjugation. Your fleets have already seized 17 trade stations and enslaved their populations. Krextar's mandible split in what might have been a grin. The strong take what they need. The weak provide what they must. This is the natural order. His gaze fell upon the human delegation's small table. Some species understand this better than others. A wave of clicking laughter arose from the Vortex allies, a handful of species that had already submitted to their rule. The sound was cruel and dismissive, and many delegates turned to look at the humans with expressions ranging from pity to contempt. The humans, Krex Tar continued, his voice dripping with disdain, have been remarkably quiet throughout these proceedings. Perhaps they recognize their place in the new galactic order. More laughter rippled through the Vortex section. Ambassador Andra of the Ethereal Commune leaned forward, her gossamer wings fluttering with amusement. Humanity has always been modest in their claims. 7 small colonies, a few dozen trade ships, hardly a force to be reckoned with. Indeed, added Commodore Ejectos of the Mercantile Union, his mechanical voice synthesized through his cybernetic vocal cords. Their military consists of, 50 vessels. Perhaps they understand that silence is the better part of valor. The mockery grew bolder. Delegates who normally maintained diplomatic courtesy began making jokes about human timidity, their small population, their unremarkable technology. Some species that had once viewed humanity neutrally now saw opportunity in joining the general ridicule. Through it all, Marcus Chen sat motionless. His breathing remained steady, his expression unchanged. The only sign that he was even listening was the slight tightening around his eyes, barely perceptible unless one was watching very carefully. Finally, as the laughter began to die down, Marcus rose slowly to his feet. The simple action seemed to command attention, and the vast hall gradually fell silent. He was not tall by most species standards, certainly dwarfed by the massive Vorthek general, but something in his bearing made others lean forward to listen. "General Krextar," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying clearly through the acoustic chamber. "Your reputation precedes you. The Vorthek supremacy is indeed known throughout the galaxy for its directness." The general's chest swelled with pride. "We are warriors. We take what we desire and destroy what opposes us. This is strength." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Yes, I can see how that would appear to be strength." He paused, his gaze meeting the general's yellow eyes without flinching. "I wonder, though, if you have given much thought to what you cannot see." A puzzled silence filled the hall. Krextar's head tilted slightly, confusion flickering across his reptilian features. "Explain yourself, human." "In my species' history," Marcus continued, his tone conversational, "we have learned that the loudest predator is rarely the most dangerous. The creatures that announce their presence with roars and displays are often compensating for something. The truly dangerous hunters move silently." The general's confusion transformed into anger. "Are you threatening us, human?" Marcus smiled, an expression so mild it seemed almost apologetic. "Not at all, General. I am simply observing that your people have made certain assumptions about mine. You assume our small fleet means we are weak. You assume our quiet diplomacy means we are afraid. You assume our peaceful colonies mean we cannot fight." He paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a strange certainty that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. "I find it curious that in all your expansion, in all your conquests, you have avoided human space entirely. 12 systems conquered, yet not one human world attacked. One might wonder why." General Krextar's scales seemed to darken. "We have had no interest in your insignificant worlds." "Of course," Marcus agreed. "Or perhaps your military advisors are more observant than your politicians. Perhaps they have noticed certain anomalies in our shipping patterns, the way our civilian vessels travel routes that make no economic sense, the strange energy signatures detected near our colonies, the fact that our small fleet somehow manages to patrol an impossibly large territory without ever seeming to stretch their resources." The hall had grown deathly quiet. Even the universal translators seemed to hum more softly, as if reluctant to break the tension. Marcus continued, his voice never rising above a conversational tone. "My people have a saying, General. Still waters run deep. We have been still for a very long time. Perhaps it is time you discovered why." Before the general could respond, an aide rushed into the chamber, moving with urgent haste toward the Vorthek delegation. The creature whispered something in Krextar's ear that made the general's eyes widen in shock. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" demanded the session moderator. Krextar stood slowly, his massive form trembling with barely controlled rage. "The human colony of New Geneva has refused our demand for tribute. They have also destroyed the 3 escort vessels we sent to encourage compliance." A gasp ran through the assembly. New Geneva was humanity's smallest and most remote colony, home to barely 50,000 souls. The idea that such a minor outpost could destroy 3 Vorthek warships seemed impossible. Marcus returned to his seat with the same unhurried grace he had shown in rising. "I did warn you about assumptions, General." Over the following hours, more reports arrived. The Vorthek's retaliation fleet of 20 vessels had been dispatched to make an example of New Geneva. They had arrived to find the colony apparently defenseless, its orbital platforms dark, and its few patrol ships nowhere to be seen. The attack had begun at dawn, local time. The Vorthek ships had swept down from high orbit, weapons charged and shields raised, expecting to burn the human settlement to ash within minutes. Instead, they had flown into the most sophisticated defensive network ever deployed by humanity. The first indication of trouble came when the lead destroyer's sensors went dark. Not damage, not jammed, simply gone, as if they had never existed. The second sign was the appearance of objects that should not have been there, sleek, Angular vessels rising from what had appeared to be empty ground, their hulls shifting like liquid mercury as adaptive camouflage fell away. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 17 minutes. No Vorthak vessel survived to report what they had seen, but automated probe data told the story. The human ships moved like nothing in the galaxy, turning and accelerating in ways that should have liquefied their crews. Their weapons struck with precision that suggested not just advanced targeting, but intimate knowledge of Vorthak ship design. Most disturbing of all were the reports from Vorthak vessels in the outer system, too far away to intervene but close enough to detect the energy signatures. The human ships weren't just using advanced technology. They were using Vorthak technology, weapons and systems that shouldn't have existed outside the Supremacy's most secure facilities. As news of the disaster spread through the Vorthak command structure, a pattern began to emerge. For months, supply convoys had been going missing. Research stations had gone dark. Entire fleets had reported ghost contacts that vanished before weapons could be brought to bear. Marcus Chen had returned to his hotel suite after the day's session, but he had not gone to sleep. Instead, he sat by the panoramic window, looking out at the stars with the patience of a man who had been waiting for something specific. At precisely 300 station time, his personal communicator chimed softly. "The Vorthak have taken the bait," reported a voice that carried the crisp authority of a military professional. "Admiral Kexamord is leading their grand fleet toward New Geneva. 237 vessels, including their flagship dreadnought." Marcus nodded, though the speaker could not see him. "Estimated arrival time: 43 hours, sir. All human assets are in position. Operation Nightfall is green." "Understood, Admiral. Remember, we are not conquerors. We are exterminators removing a pest infestation. Leave no trace of our methods, no survivors to report our capabilities. The galaxy must see only the result." "Acknowledged, sir. The Vorthak supremacy dies today." Marcus closed the communicator and returned his gaze to the stars. Tomorrow, the galaxy would learn that humanity's silence had never been weakness. It had been preparation. And now, after years of careful planning and positioning, the preparation phase was complete. The Vorthak had mocked the quiet human, dismissing him as irrelevant and weak. They had no idea that they were looking at the architect of their extinction. The reckoning. 47 hours later, the emergency session of the Galactic Trade Summit convened in an atmosphere of barely controlled panic. Reports had been flooding in throughout the night, each more impossible than the last. The Vorthak Supremacy's Grand Fleet, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, had simply vanished. Not destroyed. Vanished. 237 warships, including the massive flagship that had terrorized 100 worlds, had entered the New Geneva system and never been seen again. The few automated monitoring stations in the outer system had recorded energy signatures consistent with massive weapons fire, but no wreckage had been found. No escape pods. No survivors. No trace that the fleet had ever existed. Marcus Chen sat in the same seat he had occupied for the past 4 days, his expression as calm and unreadable as ever. Around him, delegates whispered in hushed tones, their earlier mockery replaced by something approaching fear. General Krextar was not present. His aide, a smaller Vorthak named Vexidin, stood at the delegation's table with obvious reluctance. The scales around his eyes had paled to an unhealthy yellow, and his hands trembled as he held the datapad containing what little information the Supremacy had been able to gather. "Honored delegates," Vextin began, his voice lacking the booming confidence typical of his species. "The Vorthak Supremacy has experienced significant losses. Our Grand Fleet was dispatched to address the human colony's defiance. They have not returned." Ambassador Silandra leaned forward, her gossamer wings fluttering with nervousness. "Not returned? What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Vextin said quietly, "that our most powerful military force has been eliminated. Completely. We detect no ships, no communications, No life signs. Nothing. The silence that followed was deafening. Several delegates turned to stare at Marcus, who continued to sit motionless, his hands folded calmly in his lap. Chancellor Vorthix of the hegemony was the first to break the silence. How is such a thing possible? The Grand Fleet carried enough firepower to slag a planet. The humans have what? A few dozen ships. Marcus finally stirred, raising his head slightly to meet the Chancellor's gaze. Perhaps that is the wrong question to ask, he said quietly. Then what is the right question? Demanded Commodore Ejectos, his mechanical voice carrying an edge of desperation. Marcus stood slowly, and once again the simple action commanded the attention of the entire assembly. The right question is not how we eliminated their fleet. The right question is why we chose to do so now, in full view of the galaxy, instead of quietly making them disappear as we have been doing for the past 8 months. The admission hit the assembly like a physical blow. Several delegates gasped, while others sat back in their chairs as if struck. You, Vextin's voice was barely a whisper. You have been killing our ships. Killing implies they fought back, Marcus replied matter-of-factly. We have been removing obstacles to galactic peace and commerce. Pirates, slavers, aggressors who threaten innocent worlds. The Vortex supremacy fell into all 3 categories. He began to walk slowly around the circular chamber, his footsteps echoing in the profound silence. As he moved, his quiet voice carried clearly to every corner of the vast hall. For 18 months, we have been watching this galaxy tear itself apart. Species that could be trading partners instead wage war over resources that could be shared. Peaceful worlds live in terror of raiders and conquerors. Trade routes that could connect civilizations are instead controlled by those who would strangle commerce for their own profit. Marcus paused beside the crystalline collective's delegation. Ambassador Vexthera's translucent form shimmered with what might have been fear. My people decided that this situation was suboptimal. We began to address it. Address it how? The question came from multiple delegates simultaneously, their voices overlapping in desperate confusion. Marcus smiled, the expression somehow more terrifying than any show of anger would have been. We are hunters, honored delegates. We have always been hunters. On our homeworld, we eliminated predators that threatened our communities. We tracked creatures that stole our food. We removed problems. He gestured toward the chamber's main display, where star charts showed the recent territorial changes throughout the galaxy. Red markers indicated systems that had fallen to various aggressive powers, while blue markers showed trade routes that had been disrupted or destroyed. You see expansion and conquest. We see pest infestation. The solution is the same as it has always been: complete elimination of the problematic species. The casual way he spoke of genocide sent waves of horror through the assembly. Several delegates rose from their seats, backing away from the human as if he carried some contagious disease. You're talking about the extinction of entire civilizations, breathed Ambassador Silandra. Only the ones that threaten galactic stability, Marcus clarified. The Vortex supremacy conquered 12 systems and enslaved millions. They showed no mercy, offered no quarter, respected no diplomatic immunity. They chose to be predators. We chose to be their exterminators. Vextin stepped forward, his desperation overcoming his fear. Our people. Not all Vorthax support the supremacy's methods. There are civilians, children. Marcus turned to face the Vorthak delegate directly. Your civilian population was given multiple opportunities to reject their government's policies. They chose to celebrate each conquest, to profit from each act of slavery, to demand ever more aggressive expansion. They made their choice. The simple statement carried the weight of absolute finality. Marcus resumed his slow circuit of the chamber, his voice never rising above a conversational tone. The process began 8 months ago, with what your intelligence services dismissed as random pirate attacks. Supply convoys would simply vanish. Research stations would go dark. Patrol ships would fail to report in. Each incident was small, seemingly unconnected, easily explained as the cost of doing business in a dangerous galaxy. He paused beside the empty chair where General Krextar would have sat. What your people never realized is that we were not randomly attacking targets of opportunity. We were systematically dismantling your military infrastructure. Every ship we eliminated was chosen for maximum strategic impact. Every base we destroyed was selected to create critical supply shortages. Every officer we killed was identified as irreplaceable. The delegates listened in horrified fascination as Marcus continued his explanation. The humans had spent decades infiltrating every major power in the galaxy, not as spies seeking information, but as exterminators studying their prey. They had learned the weaknesses of every ship design, the flaws in every military doctrine, the psychological profiles of every commander. The Grand Fleet's destruction was merely the culmination of a process that began months ago. By the time Admiral Kexmore arrived at New Geneva, his forces were already crippled. Half his ships were operating with sabotaged components we had introduced through your supply chain. A third of his officers had been replaced with our operatives. His battle plans were ones we had written. Marcus reached his original seat and turned to face the assembly. The battle lasted exactly 14 minutes, not because we overwhelmed them with superior firepower, but because they were fighting with weapons we had designed to fail, following tactics we had programmed them to use, trusting in defenses we had taught them were impregnable. The horrible beauty of it was becoming clear. The humans had not simply defeated the Vortex supremacy. They had orchestrated its suicide. What happened to the survivors? Asked Chancellor Vortex, though his voice suggested he already knew the answer. There were no survivors, Marcus replied simply. Survivors talk. Survivors spread information about methods and capabilities. Survivors warn others. We do not permit survivors. The chamber fell into a silence so complete that the hum of the life support systems seemed deafeningly loud. Finally, Commodore Jektos found his voice. What? What do you want from us? Marcus returned to his seat, settling into it with the same unhurried grace he had shown throughout the summit. We want what we have always wanted: peace, prosperity, and free trade. The galaxy is rich enough to support all peaceful species. The resources exist for everyone to thrive. The only obstacles to this golden age are the predators who would rather steal than build, conquer than create, destroy than cooperate. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegate after delegate. We offer the galaxy a simple choice: embrace peace and prosper under our protection, or join the Vortex supremacy in extinction. There is no third option. The next few hours passed in a blur of desperate negotiations, panicked conferences, and urgent communications with home governments. Species that had built their economies on raiding and conquest suddenly found themselves facing the prospect of peaceful coexistence or annihilation. The mathematics were simple: adapt or die. Some chose poorly. The Ravager clans, who had spent centuries pillaging trade convoys, declared their intention to hunt down and destroy humanity's coward fleets. They launched their entire armada toward human space, 800 ships carrying the finest warriors of a dozen species. The armada was destroyed 37 minutes after leaving port. No human ships were detected in the area. No weapons signatures were recorded. The Ravager fleets simply ceased to exist, as if they had flown into a cosmic void that swallowed sound and light and matter itself. Within 6 months, the galaxy had transformed. Trade routes that had been death traps for centuries became safe highways patrolled by invisible guardians. Pirate organizations that had terrorized entire sectors vanished overnight. Aggressive powers that had built empires on conquest and slavery found their fleets crippled by mysterious malfunctions, their leaders dying in accidents that seemed almost coincidental in their timing. The surviving species began to refer to humanity as the Silent Shepherds, protectors who guided galactic civilization toward peace and prosperity, while remaining almost invisible themselves. Human colonies continued to appear modest and peaceful, their fleets still numbered in the dozens rather than thousands, their diplomats still quiet and unassuming. But throughout the galaxy, in the spaces between stars where darkness reigned supreme, predators learned to fear the void itself. For in that darkness, the hunters waited with infinite patience, watching for those who would disturb the peace they had built from silence and shadow. Marcus Chen retired from diplomatic service shortly after the summit, returning to a small farm on Earth where he grew vegetables and raised chickens. Visitors who met him found a mild-mannered old man who spoke softly and smiled often, a gentle soul who seemed incapable of harming anyone. They never suspected that they were looking at the architect of the galaxy's transformation, the quiet human who had brought peace to the stars through the simple expedient of eliminating anyone who threatened it. In the end, the galaxy learned the lesson that Marcus had tried to teach them from the beginning. Still waters run deep, and the most dangerous predator is the one you never see coming. The age of conquest was over. The age of humanity had begun. And it had begun not with the roar of weapons or the thunder of fleets, but with the whisper of a quiet man who understood that sometimes peace could only be achieved through perfect, silent war.